before. I'm going to walk you through this cylinder leak tester kit on a clean screen so you can see exactly what you get and how it works. You will find a link to purchase this and other models at a discount in the description below the video. You can place your order right now. I wish I could show you a live unboxing, but today we're sticking to a screencast so you can focus on the gauges, parts, and the workflow without distractions. On the main page, you'll see it's a dual gauge design with a regulated input gauge and a leak percentage gauge.
Did you know that the best discounts on Amazon last only a few hours? That's why I launched 2 channels where I publish the highest discounts on Amazon products in real time every day. Follow the link in the description and subscribe to our Threads and Telegram channels right now to consistently save money on your everyday purchases.
The stated range is 0 to 100 PSI and 0 to 700 kPa, which covers typical shop air and lets you tune input pressure precisely. The kit is aimed at gasoline engines and includes adapters that fit common spark plug sizes from 10 mm up to 18 mm, so small garden engines, motorcycles, and most cars are covered. Diesel engines are out of scope for this style because they require much higher test pressures and different fittings. Here's what's in the case when you open it on screen. The block with a restrictor and regulator, an input hose with a quick coupler, the leak gauge with an easy-to-read face, and a set of threaded adapters. The 14 mm adapter will be the default for many cars, with 12 mm and 10 mm for smaller engines, and 18 mm for some older applications. Look for O-rings on each fitting and use a bit of thread sealant on tapered connections if the manual calls for it. If any joint hisses, the reading will be off, so assembly tightness matters more than force. Hand snug and a small wrench nudge is plenty. Before testing, I show how to zero the leak gauge. With no air connected, the pointer should sit at 0. Some kits ship slightly off. If there's a bezel screw or an adjustment, bring it to 0. If not, note the offset and compensate mentally. Next, we connect shop air and set input pressure. Many techs standardize at 100 PSI because percentage math is straightforward, but 90 PSI is also fine if your compressor cycles often. What matters is a stable input and consistency across cylinders. If the regulator drifts, it's called regulator creep. Turn the knob slowly and give it a second to settle before taking a reading. Now we walk through the engine setup. Disable ignition and fuel so it won't start. Remove the spark plug for the cylinder under test and rotate the engine to top dead center on the compression stroke. I show the simple trick on screen. Use a straw or zip tie in the spark plug hole and watch it rise while feeling for compression. At TDC, both valves are closed. Lock the crank if you can. Air pressure tends to push the piston down. A breaker bar on the crank bolt or 5th gear with the parking brake set helps keep it steady. Thread the correct adapter into the spark plug hole by hand to avoid cross-threading. Then connect the tester's hose. With the regulator set, connect air and watch both gauges. The left gauge tells you your reference pressure. The right shows leak percentage past the built-in orifice. A healthy cylinder typically shows low leakage, often under 10 to 15%. Numbers in the 20s suggest wear or a small issue. Anything 30% and up needs attention. But the number alone isn't the full story. The sound you hear tells you what's wrong. If you hear hissing at the throttle body, the intake valve isn't sealing. Hissing at the tailpipe points to the exhaust valve. Air in the oil filler cap indicates blow-by past the rings. Bubbles in the radiator, if it's a cold system and the cap is off, suggest a head gasket or a crack. I zoom in on the fittings because this is where budget kits live or die. The hose quick coupler should click positively. The regulator should have a smooth sweep with no sudden jumps. The gauge faces should be readable with clear markings at 10% increments. If the leak gauge is color-banded, use it as a rough guide, not gospel. On some lower-cost kits, the orifice dimension isn't standardized, which can skew the percentage slightly versus professional references. That's not a deal-breaker for home diagnostics as long as you test all cylinders with the same tool and compare them. We also look at practical limitations. Short hoses are easier to seal, but can be annoying on transverse engines. This one is a middle length that keeps pressure loss modest while reaching tight bays. The adapters cover 10, 12, 14, and 18 millimeters, but thread reach can differ among engines. If your plug uses a long reach seat and the adapter is short, readings can shift. Keep an eye on O-rings. Dryness makes them leak. A dab of oil helps them seal and last longer. If your compressor is small, wait for it to fully charge so the input gauge doesn't sag during the test. As for accuracy, I'm candid here. These dual-gauge testers do the job if you're methodical. Calibrate your expectations by testing a known good cylinder first. If cylinder 1 is 8% and cylinder 2 is 28% under the same conditions, that delta is meaningful, even if the absolute numbers aren't laboratory perfect. Repeatability beats perfection. If you see the needle bouncing, recheck TDC and make sure the crank isn't moving. Being off a few degrees can open a valve slightly and inflate the leak number. I wrap with care tips. Store the gauges in the case so the faces don't get knocked around. Back off the regulator when done so the diaphragm isn't under constant tension. Keep the adapters bagged so grit doesn't chew the threads of your head. If you work on motorcycles or small engines a lot, the 10mm adapter is the hero. For most cars, you'll live on 14mm. And remember, this is a leak-down tester for gasoline engines. For diesels, you'll want a compression gauge or a dedicated high-pressure kit. Overall, the kit is practical for DIY and light pro use with straightforward gauges, useful adapter coverage, and a learning curve that rewards patience. The trade-offs are typical of this price tier: possible regulator creep, occasional O-ring leaks, and gauges that may need a gentle zero. If you can live with that and follow the steps I showed, it will help you pinpoint valve, ring, or head gasket issues before you spend money on parts. If this walkthrough helped, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment with your questions or your test results.